Welcome to Immigreats, the podcast that highlights stories of immigrants making great contributions in their adopted countries. My name is Munatsi Manyande, and I'm your host. I was born and raised in Zimbabwe, in Africa, and I now live in Texas, USA with my family. Before getting into today's episode, I'm excited to share a word from our sponsors. I'm grateful for our friends at Alma Law in Dallas, Texas. Alma Law is one of the United States' top immigration law firms. They're a great resource for immigrants that are already in the United States and for people that are looking for professional assistance to move to the United States. I can confirm that the process of moving to the United States can seem daunting. Alma Law specializes in handling all manner of immigration cases, from your J-1 physician visas, investor and entrepreneur visas, family immigration issues, temporary employment, special petitions, permanent resident adjustments, and any employer-related compliance issues. You can call them in the U.S. on 972-573-8575, or you can email them at help@alma-law.com to schedule a consultation. Visit their website at alma-law.com for more information. Today, I'm excited to be having a conversation with a gentleman named Nawar Shora, who's got a really cool story. Was not born in the United States, but has been doing some really impactful things in the United States since he arrived. I don't want to steal too much of his thunder, so I'm just going to welcome you to Immigreats, Nawar. Thank you so much for saying yes to doing this interview, and we are excited to learn from you today.
It's great to meet you, Munatsi. Thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here and share my immigrant story. Absolutely.
Oh, fantastic. Let's get into it then. Let's start at the beginning. Can you just tell us a little bit of kind of where you were born, who you are, what kind of family you're coming from, and what led to you emigrating to the United States?
Sure. So I was born in Damascus, Syria, 47 years ago. And was a double immigrant, actually, because I immigrated to the United States in 1987. I say as a short, fat, hairy Arab Muslim kid. At the peak of airline hijackings in the 80s, to say there's culture shock is an understatement. But before I get there, I was already an immigrant from Syria to Saudi Arabia. I left Syria at age 3. I have no recollection. And for the 7 years after, I spent in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Now, the lucky thing there was that I lived in an international compound. So I had American friends, German friends, British friends, other Arab friends, and so on. And then that allowed me to kind of get exposed to the broader world. And I was lucky enough to travel a lot during those 7 years, to come to the States, to go to Europe, and so on. Yeah. And 1987 came, and now I look back and reflect that I'm a proud Arab redneck. You're an African or Zimbabwean cowboy or whatever, right? But for me, I look back now, that's my home state. I've made lifelong friends there. Obviously, that wasn't the case initially with that immediate culture shock.
I bet.
And I've got stories. I don't know when you immigrated, but again, as a kid, it's a different experience than when you're older, as a teen or as an adult. But I've got stories. And it comes full circle. And I'll pause for you to ask questions. But just to say, part of what I do, part of what defines my career, part of what defines my existence, my publications to my seminars, everything is I call cultural demystification. And I started doing this cultural demystification for 24 years since I graduated law school. But in reality, I've been doing it for 30 some years, if I do my math right, 37 years, because early on I had to tell people, no, I'm not a terrorist. No, we don't own a camel. No, I'm not desert. Innocent ignorance, right? Yes, there's sometimes malice and hate, but most of it is just innocent ignorance. People don't know.
It's true. I mean, when you talk about innocent ignorance, when we talk about that, you find that I just had flashbacks to, when I first came to the United States as a kind of an 18-year-old going to university, in Missouri, years ago. And I remember sitting in a cafeteria one of my first week on campus, and obviously, I've got an accent. I don't sound very American at all. And there's just a lot of curiosity about this kid from this place in Africa. Didn't take very long to realize that Americans in school don't learn very much about African geography. And so in a lot of people's minds, Africa is just kind of one continent, one blurb. I think in some people's mind, it might even just be a single country. And so I had some interesting conversations with people asking about Africa, where you're from, where exactly in Africa. And I think you start off almost kind of taking offense sometimes to the ignorance, but then after a while you realize, no, this is not, this is not intentional. People, the fact that they're asking these questions is they're genuinely curious and they want to learn. And I think it's an opportunity to actually teach and actually, help them understand and broaden their horizons a little bit. So, but I do remember, even, a couple of people asking me, so, hey, just hope you don't mind me asking this, but how old were you when you first put on a pair of shoes, because, there's obviously, I don't know what TV content they were watching, but, in some people's minds, Africa was still very much that dark, backwards continent. I had somebody asking if we had lions and giraffes in our backyard, So I guess that relates to your camel question. So it's interesting, but it is innocent ignorance, like you put it, but it does give opportunities to teach and share our cultures and help people understand that there's a lot more that brings us together than that separates us.
Exactly. That's what I focus on. I'm lucky enough to say I focused on that early on as a young adult, but especially over the past, in my career, I try to bring people in because it's human nature for us to think exclusively, and then we put this kind of myopic lens up and we just see my people. When you kind of able to break that down, fortunately, then you're like, oh wait, we're way more similar than I realized. Whether it's on culture, whether it's on cuisine, whether it's on religions and ideology, right? And I always, part of my go-to is I reference my mother, who's just a sage, and she taught me early on in West Virginia. She taught my brother and I, to be a good Muslim, you must first be a good Jew and a good Christian. And I say that, and people are like, "Wait, what? You believe in our God?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's not the whether you say God or Yahweh or those are linguistic terms, not religious terms, right?" And so I love shocking people with that I worship the same Abrahamic deity, the same Judeo-Christian God, and it's made for some fun stories over the years, actually.
No, I bet. One of the things I'm appreciative about, having grown up in Zimbabwe. So I went to a private Catholic high school as a kid, even though I wasn't born or raised Catholic. And part of the curriculum was, this class we had to take, called religious education. And, we'd spend quite a bit of time learning about catechism, Catholicism, and spend quite a bit of time too learning about other, religions. And so I remember being a, 13, 14-year-old boy and having to study about, Islam and, trying to understand the tenets of it. I remember, and it was also one of those schools where even though it was Catholic, we did have a good number of, Muslim students that were there and students, who were Jewish and, Hindu and so on. And, being able to actually ask some of these questions to your friend, that's sitting next to you that, is coming from a very different background than you are and get a lot of clarity and understanding was really cool. And again, the point you make where you come out of it realizing we have a lot more in common than you would realize. So I think it's cool that you've approached, your life, from that perspective. And I mean, obviously a lot of the things you've done with your career, have kind of lent themselves to that, I think, because of that approach. So thanks for sharing that. Can you talk to us a little bit about your kind of, academic journey? So I know you mentioned that you, went to law school. So you grew up in West Virginia. Did you go to stay in West Virginia for college? And then kind of what was that journey like?
Yeah, certainly. I come from a long line of medical professionals. My father was a physician. My grandfather was a surgeon. His father was a pharmacist. As a kid, people would tell me, you talk a lot, you should be a lawyer. What that meant, besides, I talk a lot. I have a lot of thoughts. I have a lot of opinions. And my maternal grandfather was a lawyer and a leader and a politician, and my son is his namesake. And I look up to all four of my grandparents truly, but he was the last lawyer in the family. And so I grew up in Huntington, West Virginia. I graduated high school in 1994 and went to the home university, went to Marshall University, majored in journalism. There was no pre-law program then. I'm like, okay, what can I do? I know I want to go to law school and I don't want to do accounting or, I'm terrible in basic arithmetic, so I know my limits. I did finish college in 3 years. I was on a mission. So I graduated 3 years. I became student body president. I found my, proverbial voice in college more so than high school, especially in college, and went on to law school. State and state. West Virginia University, they compete in state, but I love both. Again, it's my home state, and frankly, just financially, it made more sense to be in state than to go abroad. Even though I got into different schools for law school that would have been, rated higher on the rankings or whatever, but it's still my Juris Doctor, and I have no regrets having gone to Marshall and WVU. And in fact, and I say this in my presentations sometimes. I don't just teach culture and religion. I try to I try to inspire, I try to motivate. And I was the commencement speaker at Marshall University in 2018. I sent the link, and it was one of the greatest professional moments of my life. I mean, approximately 14,000 people in a huge civic center, me back in my hometown, where 30 some years later, I was bullied and beat up and knocked out and pushed into urinals and made fun of, and you name it, right? To come back, it was full circle with such just honor and pride to speak before everybody and tell them my journey again as an immigrant, but also to remind them that with the one phrase I shared, and I randomly picked people to stand up, and I said, Mark Zuckerberg isn't better than you. People kind of like give you that look, but I'm like, no, he's this young entrepreneur, youngest billionaire. He's done great things for society and bringing the world closer. But I didn't want every single one of those graduates to remember that even this pinnacle up here, it didn't have to be Mark Zuckerberg. It could be Michael Dell. It can be, pick your leader, pick your innovator, Steve Jobs, whatever, right? Is it better than you? And part of it is I'm a big fan of failure, right? I openly say I've failed multiple times, and I'm proud of that. And going back to the original part of the question, I went to law school first year, having made A's and B's throughout college. I graduated in 3 years. I was an excellent student. A was good, B was bad. That's how it worked.
I can relate.
Great. And I'm like, what's this weird, I don't know what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
Second semester, straight season in F. And they're like, sit out for a semester. I'm like, I'll sit out for a whole year. Like I'm the youngest kid in class. I'm only 20. I'll take a year off.
Right.
Back from that failure and did much better in law school because my brain wasn't wired right for it in the first round. Didn't putz around for that year. I worked as a legal secretary. I wrote a poetry book and I took some language classes. Like, there's always this internal fire in me that I need to be doing something. I can't just sit and say, all right, let's go party. And I graduated law school in 2001.
Okay.
Having focused on cyber law. At WVU, we had early 2000s, cyber wasn't as big. And we had a professor who came to West Virginia from, I forget if it was Yale or where, but she was a very, just a national expert on this stuff. And she offered courses and I loved it. I ate it up. I'm not technical, but I loved the concept of, taxation, jurisdiction, before avatars were avatars. And I'm suggesting ideas in class of what if somebody grows up online and their age is more advanced online than they are in real life. Are they more, of course, my classmates are like, you've watched The Matrix.
Take the other pill next time, right?
And that was going to be my focus. And I was going to go work for a .com in California or something. But happened in 2001, two big things happened. One,
that's right.
.com bubble burst. And two, of course, 9/11 happened.
That's right.
And I was an unemployed lawyer living between my brother's couch and my girlfriend's apartment in Morgantown and in DC when 9/11 happened. Again, I'm of Arab extraction. I'm Muslim. And my immediate reaction was I wanted to go to New York to help with the cleanup, to volunteer, to do something. I didn't have a job. And my 60-year-old mother at the time was like, no, like somebody will attack you. And in fact, I had a goatee then. And September 12th, mom calls me up. She's like, shave your beard. I'm like, what? Like, again, my identity is American.
Right.
Like, you look too Arab. Somebody's going to attack you. And you love this Munatsi. Then I'm like, wait, what about Kareem, my brother? Like, he can pass for white. So even my own mother recognized with society's lens up, I'm Puerto Rican. I'm something not white. My full-blooded brother is fair-skinned, non-crooked nose, right? Light hair. I'm bald now, but light hair.
Yeah.
Pass for Jason, right? No, Mark can't pass for Jason. I've tried. I joke, maybe Jose. I'm not feeling. I'm okay with that, right? We're probably about the same age. Maybe I'm probably older actually, but in my head, we're 30. But I got to Chips. Remember Chips in the 80s? The cop motorcycle show Chips.
Oh yes.
I got to be the cool one. I got to be Ponch. Got to be John. He's not American.
I love that. I love that.
So, and again, obviously priorities changed. Within the same few weeks, I applied. I didn't go to New York to keep my mom's peace of mind.
Yeah.
But I applied to be an FBI special agent because I'm like, wait, I speak the language. I know the real religion. What they did is certainly not my faith, right? And I applied to work for the largest Arab American civil rights organization, ADC.
Okay.
I had interned the year prior, so ADC was like, yep, we're swamped, come on over, you're hired. FBI was a very slow-moving bureaucracy, and ultimately, within a few months, honestly, within less than 6 months, I was training at the Metro Police Department in Washington, D.C., at the FBI Academy. So I came in as a guest lecturer and stayed as a guest lecturer for a while because there was this immediate void, right? Society, a lot of the so-called post 9/11 groups, society kind of labeled us and put us as Black, white, Latino, depending on our skin tone. But we blended in. For better, for worse, we were invisible, right? Going back to the early 20th century, Arabs were deemed white, even though we're not, right? There are Arabs that are dark as you, if not darker, and there are Arabs that are like my brother, right? But that's what society dictated. Now, as of a month ago, that's changing, and now they're going to incorporate MENA, Middle East, North African, as its own. But for the longest time, I'd say other, because I don't know where I fit.
Yeah.
So
no, that's fascinating. It's fascinating. I remember, in fact, when you were talking about just college and all of that stuff. First question I have is, were you at Marshall at the same time as Randy Moss?
Yes.
Was? Okay, that must have been a special time, if you were into football. I remember when I first moved to the U.S. and starting to learn about American football, and Randy Moss he was kind of tearing up the NFL at that point. And so I remember kind of reading at some point that he went to Marshall University, and I remember actually looking it up because I'd never heard of Marshall, and so that's cool.
Yeah, I knew. So I don't pretend that we were friends. We weren't friends, but we had mutual friends. So I'd be walking to I was student body president. I'd be walking to my office. He'd be in another sitting there.
You were student body president, and then he was just the president, right? I'm sure this is the coolest dude on campus.
Right? Yeah.
No, that's cool. And then you mentioned kind of what happened on September 11th, 2001, and I remember that day vividly too. I was just starting out my second year of university, and I still remember kind of getting up from my dorm room, and I hadn't bothered to turn on the TV, and this was before smartphones or all of that stuff. So I got ready for class, and I get out of my dorm room, and to get to class, I had to walk through kind of our little student union building on campus, and and cut through the building as a kind of a shortcut. And I remember walking into kind of this area that was a big kind of a bowling alley in this student union. And there were TVs, kind of, those TVs right above the, the bowling lanes. And there were probably 150, 200 students kind of just standing around looking at these TVs, which was really unusual for, that time of day in the middle of the week. And I remember looking up at the TV, and right as I looked up, they were replaying kind of this footage of one of these planes that was going, right into, one of the towers. And it's one of those things where, I think you remember where you were, when this happened, or when you heard, or when you saw it, and it's something you'll never forget. And then I also remember, the next time I tried to board a flight, after that had happened, and everything was just different. The rules for flying, the rules for boarding, what you could bring on board, and and all this stuff. I tell my kids today, just how much easier it was back then. You could basically walk onto a plane with anything outside of firearms and stuff like that. And so a lot changed that day. But, because, I was a young man from Zimbabwe in Africa, in many ways, I don't know that much changed in terms of how I was perceived by the world. But I can only imagine what it would have been like, being, an Arab, Arab American Arab, because I think, if I remember correctly, I think some of the terrorists that hijacked those planes were, had even gone to college here in America, or at least, flight school or something. So even the whole process of getting your I-20 for your as a student, for your student visa stuff, all of a sudden there was a lot more checks that had to go into it. The document needed to be a lot more secure, and it's just a lot changed. So just curious. I mean, I know you've mentioned kind of some of the stuff you're doing professionally, but I'd love to hear about just exactly what did that mean. What did that do for you on a personal level? Once this this happened, obviously you decided to work in that space to try to kind of help. I'm curious about just on a personal level, what did all that mean? And then I'd love for you to expound a little bit on, when you talk about the trainings that you were doing, with the police and so on, exactly what exactly were you training people on?
Sure. No, those are valid questions. So I joined ADC as a legal advisor, and fairly quickly decided, because there wasn't a relationship, I decided we need to be reaching out to law enforcement, because up until 9/11, again, we could blend in. I was saying how we blended in, and 9/11, if there is any silver lining of that tragedy, it forced these communities to come out of the shadows, to find themselves. And the beauty of our American society is that you're free enough, you're mobile enough to do that. And so literally reached out to, again, Metro Police Department in DC, local FBI. I was one of the 5 founding members of what came to be known as AMSAC, the Arab Muslim Advisory Council for the FBI. And we would just meet every few weeks, maybe 4 to 8 weeks, with FBI leadership and just talk. We didn't always agree. We didn't always see eye to eye, but we talked and we were having communication, right? My secret formula, my not so secret formula that I've been saying now for 23, 24 years is communication plus understanding equals trust, right? If I know how to effectively communicate with you, if I truly understand you, I don't have to agree with you, but I truly understand you, then the trust will blossom organically. And if we trust one another, then anything's possible, right? And so I started working with law enforcement, and then for whatever reason, the General Board of Church and Society of the Methodist Church reached out, and they were like, can you come talk to us about your communities, be they American Muslim? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I'm lucky. I was plug and play by luck, because when I was off of law school that one year, I wrote a poetry book, I took lessons, I was a legal secretary, and I came up with this quiz just to teach people about, well, not to teach people, to ask people about what they thought of Arabs and Muslims. And I remember it out and like laughing at some of the responses or whatever. That literally became the basis for my book, right? And the basis for my seminar. So the entire thing is based on this 10-question quiz. I learned early on in my career, if I have them laughing, they're paying attention to me. So we have fun, and we disarm very serious topics with humor and self-deprecation. And again, my mind is very American. I've been here since I was 10, but still am in touch with my national origin and my faith and so on. And so fall of 2001, I started doing these seminars, and success leads to more success, and it just snowballed. All of a sudden, you fast forward a few years, and I'm teaching. I joke that I've taught every 3-letter agency except the NSA, but I figure they're listening in. You're welcome. But there was a hunger to say, we're not sure who you all are. And again, whether it was church groups, whether it's universities, whether it's academic institutions, whether it's private corporations, but mostly government and law enforcement, there was this, what I call cultural demystification opportunity. It's not sensitivity training. I don't like that. That's saying like, oh, pet me, I'm special. No, we're all special. What's the saying? Remember, you're unique, just like everyone else, right? But it was to disarm this intimidating topic and explain about, again, appearance, geography, social and behavioral norms and mores, traditions, food, anything. And then I inject a lot of personal stories, like my mother teaching me to be a good Muslim, you must first be a good Jew and a good Christian, right? And that stays with me. And I pass that along to my seminars. And I've been a Fed for 14 years. I continue to do these trainings either in my capacity as in government to other government agencies and entities and officers and so forth. Or even when I wasn't, I was coming in, again, training with justice or homeland security or you name it. And so it tells me there's a need for it still. I'd love to put myself out of the job. I'd love it if people were like, hey, we understand you. Good. Next. But unfortunately, I still think we're the greatest country on earth. Hands down. Hands down. I'm lucky to be an American. And I say this, I'm that immigrant, right? My son is first gen, and I'm so proud to be an American. And as great as we are, we've always had a them throughout our history. Chinese Exclusion Act, where for 11 years, no Chinese immigrants were allowed to enter this country.
That's right.
American Indians, African Americans, Latinos, Jews, Catholics, Italians, Irish, German, right? Japanese internment, Latinos, of course. And you know what? It's a rite of passage. So now it's our turn. I love. I think you'll appreciate this, person of color. I love telling the story. I was teaching at the police academy in DC years ago, and the force overwhelmingly mirrors the community. So probably maybe 75% black, and I'm 5'8" on a good day. So just put, you can't tell. And this big black officer, like 7'10", just massive dude, walks up afterwards, and he's like, "Welcome to the club." And I'm like, your club's card's not accepted anywhere. Like, lighthearted way, he's saying, been there, done that. Your community's gone through nothing like my community has. And you know what? He's right. I say we, the smaller communities, right? Be they Arab, be they Muslim, be they Sikh, be they South Asian, be they Persian. We look to the larger communities who've been, you all have been the trailblazers, whether it's African American, whether it's Latinos, whether it's Asian American, whether it's Jewish American, right? Those are like 4 biggies. And I'm like, oh, they're doing it right. Oh, we can learn from that. Oh, we should partner up here. We as a community, right? And I don't think people do that enough. And not to exclude the majority. Like, it's not like white America is bad. I'm not one to vilify anything. In fact, I'm like, no. But partnership, building that trust is key. So
Absolutely. No, I agree with you 100%. I too, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to live in America, to actually build a life, raise a family here. And my life looks a lot different from what it would look like if I had never moved here, for sure. And I'm extremely grateful. And, you're right. It's not a perfect place, but the truth is no place is, right? But it's also been a place that's afforded me and my family and a lot of people that I know, great opportunity. And, my hope is that, I can contribute like you're doing to helping, build it into a better place, a more complete, kind of place where even my own kids, will, grow up and really feel at home, but also really go out of their way to make others feel at home, even if they don't look like them. So I commend you for the work that you're doing. You've written a couple of books. Can you just talk to us a little bit about, those books that you've written and kind of what led to you writing them?
Sure. It's funny. I remember I was a civil rights lawyer in maybe 2004. My training program had been taking off. I'd been going around to, all sorts of places giving these seminars. And it hit me. I'm like, well, how do I replicate this? The content is easy, whether it's breaking down the religions or the geography, that's easy. But how do I capture this fun infotainment and then replicate it? So I'm like, you know what? Let me write a book. And I'm one to just be like, all right, let's do something. Let's go. Yeah. And it took me, I want to say over 4 years, start to finish.
Okay.
I understand how people write books, by the way, in like 6 months, ghost writers or whatever. But it was, I remember any downtime I had at work, after hours, at home, I was just driven to write it. And it was, again, based on this quiz from law school. And it was just starting to incorporate my own stories, do the research, of course, but the content is the same, right? Again, the content is simple. Talk about the, Andalusia and Islamic Spain and the Moors invading and what that is. I could give just that story and you're like, okay, great. Thanks for the history lesson, bub. But the way I do it is, again, with kind of that fun of, all right, here's my movie idea. Think like 300 graphic novel. And the Moors, I mean, not just the Moors, the Andalusians were one of the largest empires in history, and it spanned all across Africa, all the way to the borders of China and India. But they stopped. They didn't go into Europe until a Christian chief asked for help from the Umayyads out of Damascus, right? But here's the badass story, right? Tariq bin Ziyad, the one-eyed Berber general who wasn't even Arab, but he was Muslim, crosses Gibraltar, which is a poor transliteration of his name, Jabal Tariq, literally Mount Tariq, with a small navy, torches the ships on the beach, which is kind of, badass, kind of stupid.
Yeah.
Is behind us and the enemy's in front of us. And there's only out. And they attack the Visigoths who were oppressing the local Jewish and Christian communities. And they kill King Roderick in battle. And that was the birth of 800 years of civilization, right? Pretty cool. And so the way I tell the story, it's more, you're like, I'd watch that movie actually. Yeah, let's do that. Versus, in 7-Eleven, the Moors invaded Spain. And of course, the year has to be 7-Eleven, which is just hilarious because I tell people, I'm like, that's not why the stores are called that, because people think, oh yeah, Arabs, they're all cashiers at a gas station, right? So you get the idea. And then that was the book, basically. That was 2010. We did first edition, second edition within a year. And you're doing my seminars and whatever, but then it went dormant. 2021, my publisher reached out and he's like, we're ready for a third edition. Start updating, whatever. Well, I started updating and adding, and I'd matured and my stories got better and my experiences were more telling. And so he's like, time out. It's not even a third edition anymore. Now it's
a new book,
standalone book. So that's why I made 2 books, because the camera's actually on the first book because I needed it high enough. So the first book is called The Arab American Handbook. The second is called Muslims, Arabs, and Arab Americans, but basically just an evolution of the first book. And you can see here, it's a cowboy, but he's saying, Assalamu alaikum. Cowboys, tell this to like the next cowboy you see in Texas. You're like, a lot of what you're wearing is actually Andalusian, right? But they were great horseback riders. They the cowboy boot design, they call that a Damascus design. A lot of cuisine is Mediterranean essentially, and so there's a very clear connection to cowboy culture and Andalusia, again, especially Mudehars were the Muslims who kept their faith in secret, but they stayed in Spain, and Morinos who were the Jews who kept their secret, who stayed in Spain. And so very, very cool.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So. That is fascinating. No, that's cool. And so what's the typical kind of audience for the books, and where have you kind of seen a lot of the kind of impact with the books?
The books I've had with both books, right? I've had a few colleges use them as secondary resources, which was huge.
That's awesome.
I think FBI Academy at one point was using the first book. I haven't, the book just came out a few weeks ago, this new one. So I haven't really done the major push yet. You're actually my first interview when that's,
Oh, cool.
but
Breaking news. You heard it here first, right? Yeah.
when I'm with John Stewart, I'll be like, you know where
That's right.
I mean, we mentioned that because time and again, people are like, hey, you need to be on late night, not CNN, not daytime, but like, because again, it's this high energy, it's fun, it's funny, and I'm hyperactive. And so they're like, go do more of this, because we are ultimately more the same than we are different, right? Look, like, I don't care how you decide to worship. If you decide to worship, generally it's human nature to just want to feel good and help others and be helped when we need it. And if we take all those ugly barriers down, I think the world would be a better place. I understand that's very idealistic with all the ugliness taking place all over the world, be it in Ukraine and Russia, be it in Gaza and Israel, be it in Yemen, you name it, right? But I'm that diehard optimist idealist, and I have faith, I have hope. So
no, thank you. I think we need a lot more hope and faith in this world. So I'm really grateful for the work that you do. Nawar, tell us if people want to find you kind of online, what's the best way to find you? If somebody wants to buy a copy of your book, where can we make that happen?
Yeah, I'm just sending people to Amazon. If you're interested in the book, certainly go to Amazon. That's an easy one that people usually can get. I hate to Google me because it sounds very pretentious. You can also Google me, but generally, if you want to order a book, I'd say go to Amazon. If people are interested in seminars, they can certainly, you can find me on LinkedIn. That's my professional platform. My Facebook is more about cars and Batman, but I'm on there. My name is NAWARSHORA, and I'm more than happy to respond to people, right? And that's happened a lot. People have been like, oh, I read your book and ask you a few questions, or I'm teaching this to my class, but I'm not sure how to pass it on. Can you help here? Or would you be interested in coming and doing a seminar? And I'm speaking at a think tank later this week, actually. Same stuff. It's always the same stuff. But at the same time, I say no two sessions are identical because it's meant to be interactive. So
that's right.
We'll talk more about pop culture. Sometimes we'll talk more about history. Sometimes we'll talk more about my personal life. Hey, how'd you end up in West Virginia? My dad lost a bet. No, I'm kidding. So it's just opportunity. And I always welcome the chance to have that opportunity to talk to people. Abraham Lincoln apparently said, I don't like that man. I think I'll get to know him. And I said that, I always say this, and I said this in my commencement speech, I walk around with a Post-it note on my forehead that says, I'm Arab, I'm Muslim, ask me a question, right? I want that engagement. You think let's talk about it. You hate me, or you think you hate me, let's talk about it.
Right.
I disagree with Samuel Huntington's concept of a clash of civilizations. I do not think there's a clash of civilizations. I think at worst, there's a misunderstanding of civilizations, that cultural misunderstanding. And for those of us who are lucky enough, such as you, such as me, to be touching several, to say, look, we're not even bridging two sides. Just look to your left and look to your right. I'm right there. We're on the same side, right? But again, I know I'm an idealist. I'm not foolish to know that there's ugliness in the world. But I've always said it's up to the good people on every side to counter the hate, ignorance, and fear. Also on every side. We need more good people taking action, and then we'll get there. We'll slowly just move that pendulum a bit more in the right direction. So,
no, thank you. I think that's a perfect place to end the interview. Just on a high note, but really well put. I've had the privilege of obviously being in spaces over the years, with people that are very different from me, people from other parts of the world, and you're right that I think we could do a lot more listening. We could do a lot more of asking questions, and like we were talking about earlier, was, when, I, as a young kid from Zimbabwe, is asked, hey, how old were you when you first put on a pair of shoes? The natural reaction is to take offense, right? Because, who does this person think they are? And, they've judged me, and they think that everyone in Africa is walking around, barefoot and all this stuff. That's one reaction. But that's not really the reaction that's helpful to both of you. It's also not the reaction that I think opens the door for further interaction down the road. And so being able to kind of just take a step back and try not to operate from a place of assumption about other people. I think is really helpful. So this has been a really great conversation. I've enjoyed this. You're a very wise man and with really great experience, and I'm hoping that many people will watch or listen to this episode and enjoy it. But also that you'll get some really neat leads and connections potentially for the work that you're doing, because we just need more of it. There's just so much more. You mentioned all the different regions of conflicts, that we're aware of today, and I think, just us learning about each other and having, the conversations that need to be had, even if they're difficult conversations, is really, part of what needs to happen for us to be able to, kind of move forward in the world and hopefully, bring some semblance of understanding and hopefully healing too, where in the areas where we've all experienced brokenness. So really appreciate you, Nawar. This has been fantastic, and wish you all the best. Thanks for giving us your time.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
So that's the story of Nawar Shora, an immigrant who's made great impact on America, and I'm certain his impact is traversing the entire world as we speak. I've really enjoyed getting to learn about Nawar, learn a bit about kind of his story, where he's grown up and where he grew up and the journey he's traveled, but the tremendous impact he's making in real life situations, even today. We didn't get to talk about some of the things that he's doing today, but he mentioned having worked for the federal government for many years, and I know he's doing some really neat work even today that is informing policy and informing a lot of strategic direction for the U.S. government. And really grateful for the work that he's doing, and wish him all the best. Please like this podcast and follow us on your podcast player to catch new episodes as they drop. You can find us on social media under the name Immigreats. You can also visit our website at immigreats.net, and you can enter your email address to join the ever-growing Immigreats community. Until next time,